You have heard the year 2032, and you have probably heard a percentage attached to it, and the two together sound like a sentence that has already been passed. So let me tell you exactly where that number comes from, because it comes from one specific place. Every year, the trustees of Social Security publish a report on the finances of the program. The 2026 report says the retirement trust fund runs out of reserves in the last quarter of 2032. And here is the sentence that almost never makes it into the headline. At that point, the money still coming in would cover 78% of scheduled benefits. Not 0, 78. Today, I want to show you what that actually is, what it is not, and what a person in their 60s should reasonably do about it. Welcome back. This is the channel where we take one piece of Social Security at a time and go all the way to the bottom of it calmly using the actual documents. And this subject needs that more than any other, because it is the one where the gap between what the report says and what people believe is widest. I have talked to people who genuinely think the program stops in 2032. People who are claiming early and a permanent reduction, specifically because they think they should get what they can before it disappears. That is a decision with lifelong consequences being made on a misunderstanding, and I would like to take the misunderstanding apart. Let us start with the machine itself, because none of the rest makes sense without it. Social Security is not a savings account with your name on it. It never was. Money comes in from the payroll taxes of people who are working right now, and money goes out to people receiving benefits right now. Working people pay, retired people receive, and the pipe runs continuously. For a long stretch, more came in than went out. That surplus did not vanish. It went into a trust fund, which by law is invested in special government securities that earn interest. Think of it as the buffer tank sitting beside the pipe. Now we're in the period where more goes out than comes in each year, mostly for reasons that are no mystery. A very large generation retiring, people living longer, and fewer workers paying in for each person receiving. So the buffer tank is being drawn down. That is the whole story. The famous date is simply the year the projections say the buffer tank is empty. And now you can see why the phrase people use, running out of money, is wrong in a specific and important way. When the tank is empty, the pipe is still running. Working people are still paying in. The money in that pipe does not stop. So here are the two numbers from the 2026 report, and I want to give them to you precisely. The Retirement Trust Fund, the one that pays retirement and survivor benefits, is projected to be depleted in the fourth quarter of 2032. At that point, incoming money would cover 78% of scheduled benefits. If you look at the two trust funds combined, the retirement one and the disability one together, the projection is the third quarter of 2034 at 83% of scheduled benefits. You will see both sets of numbers quoted in the news, and they are both real. They are just measuring two different things, and that is one reason people come away confused. One more detail worth having, because it tells you something about the nature of these numbers. The 2026 report moved the retirement fund date 1 quarter earlier than the previous year's report said. Sit with that for a second, because it cuts both ways. It means the situation did get modestly worse in 1 year, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. But it also means these are projections that move. They are recalculated every year, based on how the economy actually performed. How many people are working, wage growth, birth rates, how long people are living. Change any of those, and the date moves. It has moved before, in both directions. That is why I keep saying projection rather than schedule. A schedule is a thing that will happen. A projection is what the arithmetic says will happen if a long list of assumptions holds for another 6 years. All right. Now the important part. What would 78% actually mean? Under current law, if nothing changes before that point, the program could only pay out what it takes in. That is what produces the percentage. It is not a decision by anybody to cut benefits. It is what the law already says happens when a trust fund is depleted. So the honest version of the sentence is this. If Congress does nothing at all between now and the last quarter of 2032, then under current law, the retirement fund would only be able to pay 78% of scheduled benefits. Now hear the two halves of that sentence, because people only ever repeat the second half. The first half is a condition. If Congress does nothing at all. For 6 more years, with a date on the calendar that every member of Congress can see, and with more than 60 million people receiving benefits, many of whom vote in every single election. I am not going to tell you what Congress will do, because I do not know, and neither does anybody making videos about this. There are many proposals. None of them have become law. That is genuinely the whole honest status of it, and anybody telling you they know the outcome is guessing. But I will point out something about the shape of the problem, because it matters for how you plan. This is not a mysterious problem. Everybody involved knows the date. It is published every year in a report you can read. There is no version of this where it arrives as a surprise in 2032. Now I want to answer 3 questions I get every single time this subject comes up, because they are good questions, and the short answers are genuinely reassuring. Question 1. Is my money in there? Did they spend it? You will hear that the trust fund is just a pile of paperwork, that the government spent the money and left an empty drawer full of promises. Here is what actually happens. The surplus is invested in special government securities. That means the rest of the government borrowed it and owes it back with interest, the same way it owes anybody else who holds its debt. So the trust fund is not a vault with cash in it. It is a claim. Now, whether you find that reassuring depends on what you think of government debt in general. But it is not a trick, and it is not a hole in the floor. Those securities have been redeemed continuously for years, which is exactly what is happening right now as the fund is drawn down to pay benefits. Question 2. Does this affect people already receiving benefits or only future retirees? The projection is about the fund itself, not about a category of person. If the fund were depleted and nothing had changed, the shortfall would apply to scheduled benefits across the board. It is not a rule that only touches people who file after a certain date. That is worth knowing because a lot of people assume being already retired makes them immune, and it also explains why this is politically difficult in a way that helps you predict the shape of any solution. Any real fix has to deal with tens of millions of people who are already receiving money and already voting. Question 3. Should I be angry at somebody about this? I am going to stay out of that because this channel is about the rules and not about blame. But I will say one thing that might be useful. This particular arithmetic has been visible in these reports for decades. The demographics were not a secret. Nobody hid the birth rate, which, again, is the reason I keep pointing at the report rather than at the headlines. The report is a boring document published on a schedule, and boring documents published on a schedule are the best defense you have against being frightened by somebody who wants something from you. Which brings me to the question you are actually asking, which is, what should I do? Here are 4 things, and then 2 things I would not do. First, do not claim early because of this. This is the one that actually costs people real money today in exchange for a fear about the future. Claiming before your full retirement age reduces your benefit permanently, not until 2032. Permanently for the rest of your life, and for a surviving spouse afterward in many cases. So think about what claiming early as protection actually does. You take a certain permanent reduction now to protect yourself against an uncertain partial reduction later that would apply to a benefit you have already reduced. You have not dodged anything. You have taken the smaller amount twice. And notice something else. If the reduction did happen, it would apply to scheduled benefits, which means it would apply to whatever your benefit is at the time. Claiming early does not exempt you from it. Second, plan the way you would plan for anything uncertain. If you are making a long-term plan and you want to be careful, there is a reasonable and completely sane thing to do, which is to run your numbers twice. Once with your full scheduled benefit, once with a reduced figure, and see how different your life looks. For a lot of people, the honest answer is, it would be uncomfortable but survivable. For some, it would be serious, and those are the people who should be building other income now while they still have time. Either way, you learn something useful, and you learn it without panicking. Third, make sure you are getting what you are already owed. I say this on almost every episode because it is where the real money is for most people watching. Check your earnings record for missing years. Understand which benefits you may be eligible for on a spouse's or former spouse's record. Know how your claiming age changes your amount. Those things are decided by rules that exist right now, and they are worth far more to most households than any speculation about 2032. Fourth, pay attention when something actually passes. There is a difference between a proposal and a law, and the news does not always make that clear. When a real change happens, it will be specific, it will have a date, and it will say who it applies to. Until then, what you have is discussion. Now, the two things I would not do. I would not restructure your finances around a projection that has moved before and will move again. Not selling things, not taking a lump sum out of a retirement account, not buying a product because somebody used 2032 in a sales pitch. And that is the second one. Be careful with anybody who uses this date to sell you something. This is a real pattern, and I want you to be able to recognize it. A seminar with a free dinner. An advertisement that opens with the year and a scary percentage. A caller who says they can protect your benefits. Nobody can protect your Social Security benefit with a financial product because the benefit is set by law, not by your portfolio. Anyone implying otherwise is using a real number in the service of a sale, and the tell is the fear coming before the arithmetic. I want to say one more thing about claiming early, because I know the fear underneath it is not really about arithmetic. The fear is about being the person who did everything right and still got caught out. Paid in for 40 years, followed the rules, and then somebody moved the goalposts at the last minute. Claiming early feels like taking control of that, locking something in, getting yours before the rules change. I understand the feeling, and I would not argue with it as a feeling. But look at what it does mechanically. A permanent reduction taken at 62 is locked in for as long as you live, and it also sets the floor for what a surviving spouse may receive later. It is one of the few Social Security decisions that is genuinely hard to undo. There is a narrow window for withdrawing an application, and there is the option of suspending at full retirement age. But neither of those is a simple reset button, and most people who claim early never revisit it. Meanwhile, the thing you were protecting yourself against is a projection about the fourth quarter of a year that is still 6 years out, under an assumption that nothing will be done in the meantime. So the trade is certain and permanent on one side, uncertain and partial on the other. Whatever you decide about claiming age, and there are good reasons to claim early that have nothing to do with this, make that decision on the strength of your own health, your own work situation, and your own household, not on this date. There is one more group I want to speak to directly, and that is people in their 40s and 50s who are watching this and quietly writing Social Security off entirely. I meet a lot of people who have decided the whole thing will be gone by the time they get there, and who therefore do not include any of it in their planning at all. That sounds prudent, and in one sense it is conservative. But planning on zero when the current projection under the worst case, no action at all, is 78%, is not being conservative. It is using a number that does not appear anywhere in the report. If you want to plan cautiously, plan on less. That is reasonable. But plan on less, not on nothing, because zero is not one of the numbers on the table. Let me go back to the report one last time, because there is something in the framing I think helps. The trustees are not raising an alarm. They publish this every year precisely so that the date is public and early. The whole point of a projection is that it is a warning with lead time. The reason you have heard about 2032 at all, 6 years out, is that the system for surfacing this problem is working exactly as designed. Compare that with how you find out about most financial problems in life, which is when they land on you. So here is where I would leave it. The date comes from the annual Trustees Report. The 2026 edition puts the retirement fund at the fourth quarter of 2032 and says 78% of scheduled benefits would still be payable at that point. The combined funds are projected at the third quarter of 2034 and 83%. That date moved 1 quarter earlier than last year's report, which tells you both that it got somewhat worse and that these numbers move. Depletion is not disappearance. The pipe keeps running because working people keep paying in. The percentage only happens if nothing at all is done for 6 years, which is a condition, not a prediction. And for a person in their 60s, the sound response is not to claim early out of fear. It is to run your numbers both ways, make sure you are collecting everything the current rules already entitle you to, and refuse to make a permanent decision to hedge against an uncertain one. If you have been told by somebody that the program is ending, or that you should file now before it does, I would genuinely like to hear about it in the comments, not to argue with the person who said it. It helps me know which version of this is circulating, and that tells me what to explain next. And if there is somebody in your life who has been quietly worried about this, or worse, who is about to claim early because of it, this is the episode to send them. That decision cannot be undone easily, and it is worth them having the actual numbers before they make it. Thanks for spending this time with me. I'll see you in the next episode.